Sometimes the cruelest moments in life become the catalysts for the most profound lessons in humanity. Sometimes the people we underestimate carry stories so powerful they could break our hearts and rebuild them stronger. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a way of reminding us that respect isn't given based on what we see, but earned through what we can never truly know about another person's journey. Captain James Mitchell had stopped counting the stairs years ago. The wheelchair had become part of his identity, as much as the silver wings pinned to his chest, or the scars that mapped his body, like a road atlas of sacrifice. At 34, he looked older, the kind of aging that comes not from time, but from seeing things humans should have to witness. His hands, calloused and steady, gripped the wheels of his chair as he navigated toward his usual corner, booth at Rosie's Diner, the same spot he'd claimed every Wednesday for the past 8 months since moving back home to Stillwater. Rosie herself, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and flour perpetually dusting her apron, smiled warmly as she approached. "The usual, Captain?" she asked, her voice a soothing contrast to the raucous noise coming from the bar area. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you," James replied, his voice quiet but firm, carrying the kind of steadiness that comes from having commanded men in the most desperate of circumstances. The 4 bikers at the bar had been growing louder for the past hour, their voices lubricated by whiskey and emboldened by the audience of a few locals who seemed too uncomfortable to leave but too polite to intervene. They were passing through town, their motorcycles parked outside like metal horses, and they carried themselves with the swagger of men who believed the road belonged to them. "Hey, wheelchair guy," the largest one called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Where'd you see action? The parking lot at the mall?" His friends erupted in laughter, slapping the bar with their palms. James didn't turn. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, that some people carried so much of their own pain they could only feel better by diminishing others. He simply opened his menu, though he already knew what he'd order. The routine was comforting, predictable in a way his life had stopped being 3 years ago, over the skies of hostile territory. "I'm talking to you." "Captain America," the biker persisted, standing now, his bulk casting a shadow across the diner floor. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue, or did you leave that overseas too along with your legs?" The diner fell silent. Even the cook stopped flipping burgers. Rosie's hand trembled as she poured coffee, her eyes darting toward the phone, wondering if she should call Sheriff Morrison. James finally turned his head, his blue eyes meeting the biker's bloodshot gaze. "I'm just here for lunch, sir. Not looking for any trouble." "Sir?" the biker mocked, puffing out his chest. "You hear that, boys? He called me sir. Maybe there is some military in him after all, though I doubt those wings are real. My uncle was Air Force. Real pilots don't end up in wheelchairs. They're too good for that." Something flickered across James's face, a shadow of memory. The sound of alarms blaring in the cockpit. The missile warning, the split-second decision that saved his wingman's life but cost him the use of his legs. The ejection at 300 feet, too low, too fast. The impact that shattered his spine but somehow miraculously left him alive. "I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me alone," James said quietly, turning back to his menu. The biker took a step closer, his boots heavy on the checkered linoleum. "Or what? You gonna roll over there and make me?" That's when the door opened. It didn't burst open dramatically or announce itself with fanfare. It simply swung wide on well-oiled hinges, and one person walked through. Then another. Then another. They kept coming, a stream of men and women in Air Force dress blues, their uniforms pristine, their bearing unmistakable. 5, 10, 15, 20. The count kept rising, 30, 35 in total, filling the small diner until it seemed the walls might burst. The biker's face drained of color, his bravado evaporating like morning mist. At the front of the group stood a woman with silver hair and a chest, full of medals that told stories of decades of service. Brigadier General Patricia Holbrook, her 1-star insignia gleaming under the diner's fluorescent lights. She walked directly to James's table, and every single airman and officer behind her snapped to attention. "Captain Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority and something deeper, something that sounded like profound respect tinged with sorrow. James's eyes widened. General Holbrook? What are you— We couldn't miss today, Captain. None of us could. She gestured to the assembled group behind her. Your squadron, your academy classmates, officers from every base you've served at. We've come for the ceremony. Ceremony? James looked confused. An older colonel stepped forward, a framed citation in his hands. Captain James Mitchell, 3 years ago today, you made a decision that exemplifies the highest traditions of military service. When your aircraft suffered catastrophic damage during a combat mission, you could have ejected safely at altitude. Instead, you stayed with your plane, drawing enemy fire away from your wingman whose aircraft had already been hit. You provided him the cover he needed to safely eject. Only then, at an altitude far too low for safe ejection, did you punch out. Your action saved the life of First Lieutenant Marcus Chen. A young man in a flight suit stepped forward from the group, tears streaming down his face. I'm alive because of you, Captain. My wife got to meet me at the airport. My daughter got to be born 6 months later. Every birthday she has, every step she takes, exists because you sacrificed everything to give me a chance. The biker had shrunk back to his table, his face ashen. His companions wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. General Holbrook continued. We've been trying to track you down for this ceremony for months, Captain. You wouldn't return our calls, wouldn't answer our letters. So we decided to bring the ceremony to you. She nodded to the colonel, who opened the frame. The Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Captain James Mitchell displayed exceptional courage, technical skill, and devotion to duty in the face of hostile fire. His actions were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. The general pinned the medal to James's chest as all 35 service members saluted in perfect unison. The sound of their hands meeting their brows in synchronization was like a single drumbeat of respect. James's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for 3 years. I was just doing my job, he whispered. No, sir, Lieutenant Chen said, kneeling beside the wheelchair. You were being a hero, and we'll never forget it. Rosie was crying openly now, her apron pressed to her face. Several locals had tears streaming down their cheeks. The biker who'd been mocking James stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Every eye in the diner turned to him. He walked slowly toward James, his hands trembling. When he reached the table, he did something no one expected. He dropped to one knee, his head bowed. Sir, his voice cracked, I'm so deeply sorry. I have no excuse. My words were cruel and ignorant, and I spoke about things I know nothing about. I disrespected not just you, but every person who's ever served, including my uncle who I claim to honor. I was wrong, and I'm ashamed. James looked at the man kneeling before him, seeing not an enemy but someone lost, perhaps hurting in his own way. He extended his hand. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. Stand up. The biker took his hand, tears now flowing freely. How can you forgive me? Because holding on to anger takes energy I'd rather spend on living, James said simply. And because every person deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. The diner erupted in applause. The biker and his friends quietly paid their bill, each of them stopping to shake James's hand and offer their own apologies before leaving. Through the window, they could be seen sitting on their motorcycles for a long time, talking quietly before finally starting their engines and riding away, somehow changed. The ceremony continued with stories shared, laughter, tears, and Rosie insisting that everyone's lunch was on the house. Lieutenant Chen's wife had brought their daughter, a beautiful 2-year-old with her father's eyes, who walked over to James and handed him a drawing she'd made, a child's rendering of an airplane with a big heart on it. As the sun began to set and the gathering started to disperse, General Holbrook sat down across from James. You know why we really came today? Beyond the medal? Why, ma'am? Because we wanted you to remember that your service didn't end when your jet hit the ground. The way you've carried yourself since. The dignity, the quiet strength. Continuing to serve your community here, that's heroism too. Different perhaps, but no less important. James nodded, understanding settling over him like a warm blanket. That night, Stillwater's local news covered the story. It spread across social media, touching hearts across the nation. But the real impact happened in smaller ways, in the biker who started volunteering at a veterans center 2 states over, in the locals who made sure to thank every service member they encountered, in the reminder that behind every face we see is a story we cannot know, a battle we haven't witnessed, a sacrifice we cannot measure. And every Wednesday after that, Rosie's Diner had a new tradition. The corner booth was marked with a small plaque, reserved for heroes. It was never empty. Veterans from all eras, all branches, found their way there, sharing meals and stories, building community from understanding. Sometimes it takes darkness to help us see light. Sometimes it takes cruelty to remind us of the power of kindness. And sometimes it takes 35 Air Force members walking through a door to teach us that respect, dignity, and honor are never about what we can see, but about recognizing the humanity and sacrifice in every person we meet, especially those whose battles we cannot begin to imagine. Captain James Mitchell still visits Rosie's Diner every Wednesday, still orders the same meal, but now he's never alone. Surrounded by a community that learned one of life's most important lessons. That true strength often comes in the quietest packages, and that heroes walk and roll among us every day, asking for nothing but the basic dignity every human deserves.